Deep breath. All right, folks, gather round and prepare yourselves for a journey into the dark, twisted world of ancient Aztec rituals. Today, we're diving headfirst into the bone-chilling realm of death whistles, those eerie, haunting instruments that once echoed through the blood-soaked temples of Tenochtitlan. Picture this. It's a sweltering day in the heart of the Aztec Empire, circa 1500 AD. The sun beats down mercilessly on the magnificent pyramids, their stone steps sticky with the residue of countless sacrifices. The air is thick with the metallic scent of blood and the cloying sweetness of copal incense. And then, you hear it. A sound so primal, so terrifying, it makes your very soul want to flee your body. Pause for effect. That, my friends, is the blood-curdling shriek of the death whistle. But oh, if only you could truly hear it through your speakers right now. Imagine the most horrifying scream you've ever heard. Multiply it by 1,000 and infuse it with the agonized wails of the damned. That might come close to the unholy cacophony produced by these seemingly innocuous clay instruments. Now, you might be wondering, what kind of sick, twisted mind came up with these nightmare noisemakers? Well, buckle up, because we're about to take a deep dive into the macabre history of the Aztec death whistle. Let's rewind the clock to the 1990s, when archaeologists stumbled upon something unusual during excavations at the Tlatelolco archaeological site in Mexico City. Among the ancient artifacts and crumbling ruins, they unearthed small skull-shaped objects, roughly the size of a clenched fist. At first, the researchers were baffled. Were these some kind of primitive toys? Ritualistic decorations, perhaps? It wasn't until one brave, or possibly foolhardy, soul decided to blow into one of these artifacts that the true nature of the death whistle was revealed. The sound that erupted from that tiny clay skull was so utterly horrifying that it sent shivers down the spines of even the most hardened archaeologists. In that moment, they knew they had stumbled upon something truly extraordinary and deeply disturbing. But here's where things get really interesting, folks. You see, the Aztecs weren't just creating these whistles for some ancient version of a haunted house attraction. Oh no, these little noisemakers played a crucial role in one of the most infamous aspects of Aztec culture: human sacrifice. Dramatic pause. That's right, my dear listeners. These seemingly innocent clay whistles were instruments of terror, used to strike fear into the hearts of sacrificial victims and spectators alike. But before we delve into the gory details, let's take a moment to understand why the Aztecs were so obsessed with human sacrifice in the first place. You see, the Aztecs believed that the gods had sacrificed themselves to create the world and humankind. As a result, they felt a deep, almost primal obligation to repay this debt through ritual bloodshed. Human sacrifice wasn't just a religious practice. It was a cosmic necessity, essential for maintaining the balance of the universe and ensuring the continued existence of all creation. Now I know what you're thinking. Surely there must have been less messy ways to appease the gods? But for the Aztecs, blood was the most precious substance in the universe. It was quite literally the life force that kept the cosmic wheels turning. And so they spilled it in abundance, believing that each drop would help stave off the end of the world for just a little bit longer. But let's get back to our star of the show, the death whistle. Picture this. You're a captive, perhaps a prisoner of war or a slave, being led up the steep steps of the great temple of Tenochtitlan. Your heart is pounding, your palms are sweaty, and you know that in just a few moments, you'll be meeting your doom at the hands of the Aztec priests. And then, you hear it, that blood-curdling shriek, rising above the chants of the priests and the murmur of the crowd. It's a sound so terrifying, so otherworldly, that it freezes the very marrow in your bones. This, my friends, is the power of the death whistle. But why, you might ask, would the Aztecs want to terrify their sacrificial victims even more than they already were? Well, it all comes down to the quality of the sacrifice. You see, the Aztecs believed that the more fear and suffering a victim experienced, the more potent their sacrifice would be. The death whistle was a tool to amplify that terror, to push the victims to the very brink of sanity before the final fatal blow. Pause for dramatic effect. Now, let's take a moment to appreciate the craftsmanship that went into these instruments of terror. Each death whistle was carefully crafted from clay, often in the shape of a human skull or a fearsome creature. The internal structure was incredibly complex, with chambers and passages designed to produce that signature blood-curdling scream. But here's where it gets really fascinating, folks. Recent studies have shown that the sound produced by death whistles isn't just scary. It can actually have a physical and psychological effect on the human body. Dr. Roberto Velázquez, a researcher at Mexico's National Autonomous University, has conducted experiments that suggest the frequencies produced by death whistles can induce states of fear, anxiety, and even hallucinations. Imagine that for a moment. You're standing there, at the base of the temple, surrounded by thousands of spectators. The death whistle screams, and suddenly, your mind is filled with terrifying visions. The world around you warps and twists, reality itself seeming to unravel. Is it any wonder that some victims were said to go willingly to their deaths, perhaps believing they were already in the realm of the gods? But the use of death whistles wasn't limited to sacrifice rituals. Oh no, these versatile instruments of terror had other applications as well. Some historians believe that Aztec warriors used death whistles in battle, blowing them as they charged towards their enemies. Can you imagine the psychological impact of hundreds, perhaps thousands of these unholy screams echoing across the battlefield? It would have been enough to make even the bravest warrior soil their loincloth. There's also evidence to suggest that death whistles played a role in certain medical practices. Yes, you heard that right. Medical practices. Some researchers believe that the intense frequencies produced by the whistles might have been used in attempts to treat certain illnesses or injuries. It's a far cry from modern medicine, but hey, who are we to judge the medical practices of a civilization that thought human hearts made great gifts for the gods? Speaking of gods, let's talk about Mictlantecutli for a moment. This charming fellow was the Aztec god of death and the underworld, often depicted as a blood-spattered skeleton or a corpse with a skull head. It's believed that some death whistles were created in his image, their eerie screams meant to echo his own terrifying voice. Pause for effect. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Surely this is all just exaggeration. How bad could these whistles really sound? Well, my dear listeners, I'm here to tell you that the reality is far more terrifying than you could possibly imagine. In 2015, a group of researchers decided to recreate some death whistles based on ancient designs. When they blew into these replicas, the results were, well, let's just say they were glad they weren't standing at the top of an Aztec temple. The sound produced was described as a cross between a dying man's final scream and the howl of 100 tormented souls. One researcher reportedly had to leave the room, overcome by the sheer psychological impact of the noise. But here's where things get really interesting. Some experts believe that we've only scratched the surface when it comes to understanding the true purpose and power of death whistles. There are theories that suggest these instruments might have been used in complex acoustic rituals, perhaps even as a form of mind control or mass hypnosis. Imagine, if you will, a moonlit night in ancient Tenochtitlan. The great temple looms above, its steps slick with sacrificial blood. Thousands of people are gathered in the square below, their eyes fixed on the priests at the temple's summit. And then, as one, the priests raise their death whistles to their lips and blow. The sound that erupts is beyond description. It's as if the very fabric of reality is being torn asunder. The crowd below sways and moans, caught in the grip of some terrible, beautiful trance. In that moment, are they still themselves? Or have they become something else entirely? Puppets dancing to the tune of the gods. Dramatic pause. Of course, we may never know the full extent of how the Aztecs used their death whistles. Much of their culture and knowledge was lost in the wake of the Spanish conquest. but the whistles themselves remain, silent witnesses to a bygone era of blood and belief. In recent years, there's been a renewed interest in these ancient instruments. Some modern musicians have incorporated replicas of death whistles into their performances, using their eerie screams to add an otherworldly element to their music. It's a far cry from their original purpose, but it speaks to the enduring power and fascination of these artifacts. But let's not forget the darker side of this resurgence in interest. There have been reports of death whistle replicas being used in some truly disturbing ways. In 2017, police in Mexico City busted a gang that was using death whistles to terrorize neighborhoods during their criminal activities. It seems that even centuries later, these instruments haven't lost their power to inspire fear. As we draw our journey into the world of Aztec death whistles to a close, I want you to take a moment to really consider the weight of what we've discussed. These weren't just musical instruments or tools of terror. They were a window into a worldview so alien, so fundamentally different from our own, that it's almost impossible for us to fully comprehend. The Aztecs lived in a world where the boundary between life and death was paper thin, where the gods demanded blood to keep the sun rising each morning. The death whistle was both a product of this worldview and a tool for reinforcing it. Its scream was the voice of a universe balanced on the edge of a knife, forever teetering between existence and oblivion. So the next time you hear a particularly eerie sound on a dark night, or feel a shiver run down your spine for no apparent reason, just remember, somewhere out there, buried in the earth or hidden away in a museum, the death whistles still exist. Silent for now, but waiting, always waiting, for the day when they might scream again. Long pause. And on that cheerful note, my dear listeners, we come to the end of our exploration into the chilling world of Aztec death whistles. I hope you've enjoyed this journey into the past, and that you'll join me next time for another dive into the stranger corners of human history. Until then, sleep tight, and try not to have nightmares about screaming skulls.